Welcome back. Question: have you ever been ticketed or even arrested while walking or traveling in your private automobile because you failed to identify? Well, don't worry about that, because I'm about to give you some heavy ammunition by way of a court case that can shut all that down. Now, don't be selfish. Repost this and share so others may learn. Enough yap? Let's dive in. Here we have Colander versus Lawson, 1983. Now you're going to want to download this and read it in its entirety. Why? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now let's read. Here we go. A California statute requires a person who loiter or wander on the streets to identify themselves and to account for their presence when requested by peace officers. The California Court of Appeal has construed the statute to require a person to provide credible and reliable identification when requested by a police officer who has reasonable suspicion of a criminal activity sufficient to justify a stop under the standards of Terry versus Ohio. That's another case you're going to need to download. Now, what is reasonable suspicion? It's actually RAS, or reasonable articulable suspicion, which is objective, specific information known by police officers or other governmental law enforcement agents that leads them to suspect a person has or is about to commit a crime. Also, there is something stronger called probable cause. Check this out. What's the difference between probable cause and the reasonable articulable suspicion? Here we go. Probable cause demands a higher level of certainty where the facts would lead a reasonable person to believe that the accused party is guilty, while reasonable suspicion requires lower certainty and relies mainly on the officer's subjective assessment and inference from the situation. Now let's go back. So if there is no proof that you were about to commit a crime or have committed a crime, or even information that implicates that you have or will, then you don't have to surrender any identification or credentials, because that's up to them to prove. And you have to stand on your square. Now check this out below. Held. The statute as drafted and as construed by the state court is unconstitutionally vague on its face within the meaning of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment by failing to clarify what is contemplated by the requirement that a suspect provide a credible and reliable identification. Now check this out. Here we go. In sum, under the Fourth Amendment, police officers with reasonable suspicion that an individual has committed or is about to commit a crime may detain that individual using some force if necessary for the purpose of asking investigative questions. They may ask their questions in a way calculated to obtain an answer, but they may not compel an answer, and they must allow the person to leave after a reasonable period of time unless the information they have acquired during the encounter has given them probable cause sufficient to justify an arrest. Now check this out. The person may be briefly detained against his will while pertinent questions are directed to him. Of course, the person stopped is not obliged to answer. Answers may not be compelled, and refusal to answer furnishes no basis for an arrest, although it may alert the officer to the need for continued observation. Now you might ask, what if they don't want to hear anything I have to say? What if they just want to continue to force what they know is wrong, even though you put them in their place with their own laws? Then there's deliberate indifference. Check this out. Now, to prove deliberate indifference in a civil case, the victim generally must prove that the victim faced a substantial risk of serious harm, that the officer had knowledge of the risk of injury, and that officer failed to take reasonable measures to address it. How many times have you told them this is not right, and I don't have to show you anything without a crime and state the crime, and they bust your windows out? This is another thing that you can use. So to wrap it up, Colander versus Lawson is a very powerful tool to show that the tyrannical policy enforcer had no reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause, and you demand compensation for the damages. So hope this helped out. And until next time, Sacre Corpus.